Recording in progress. All right, so again, I just posted this announcement. It's got a couple of scripts in there. If you click them, it'll open them up. I already have them open. So I'm just going to go to my scripts here. The first one I look at is the silly game that I made. I showed you guys this last week. So this was my chapter 3 homework problem where I made a game. And in my introduction, I just write the shark floats around the screen, randomly farting bubbles was what I did. And you can see it in action. I haven't gotten around to adding fart noises yet. It just does a little pop right now. Okay. And the way I chose to implement this was to have 2 sprites. So let's see inside and blow this sucker up. And what I'm using here is I'm using broadcast messaging, which is in chapter 4, we're covering this week, to coordinate activities amongst the sprites. So broadcast messages have 2 main purposes. One is to get one sprite to tell another sprite something's going to happen, or do this, something like that. Or it could be used to get different parts of a single sprite scripts to do something together or in sequence, perhaps. So here what I do, and again, usually we name our messages something interesting. I default is message 1, message 2, message 3. If you have a lot of messages, when you look at your code later, you're going to be like, what the heck is message 1, 2, and 3? So we should name them better than I did here. So I'll get to that in a moment, but he's moving around the screen. And then once he gets to a position, he broadcasts message 1, and then sprite 1 over here, my circle sprite. When that sprite receives message 1, then he is going to change his size and then stamp himself. He changes his color too. Now, I can fix this, let's see, under events. Let's see, we've got, or is it, yeah, messages here. Let's rename message 1. Let's see, can I rename it? Maybe you can't, you can name new messages. I guess I'm stuck with message 1. So I could change it. Let's make a new message called fart. Okay. And then in the code for the other one, so we have every time you have a broadcast, somewhere there's got to be a receive, otherwise it's useless. And so then I want to receive the right message here. Okay, so you can have a bunch of different messages that happen. They can happen in sequence. Something can trigger them. There's all kinds of ways we can use them. So that's one of the ideas that we're going to play with in this chapter here, broadcast messages. Okay. So that's just a simple example of me having one sprite work with another sprite in sequence. The next big idea that we're looking at is what's called a procedure. So I'm going to go to my modified dancing script. And let's see, I want to see inside of it. So the original dancing script is on the left. Let's blow that sucker way up. Oh, too much. All right, so here's the original dancing script right here. And the dancing script, right, he goes to a location, we clear the graphic effects, and then forever, he basically does 2 things. He dances to the left, and then he dances to the right. And as he's dancing, we get a little effect, making him kind of wiggle a little bit. But this repeat block, let's pick on, say, this chunk right here. These 2 repeat blocks, the repeat 20s, they're almost identical, right? The only difference is the first one moves 1 step and the fisheye effect is +1. And the second block has a move -1 step with a fisheye effect of -1. So often when we have a repeated block of code like that in our program, and what if I wanted 10 more of those moving around in slightly different ways with slightly different fisheye effect? Do I really want to repeat this block 6, 7, 8, 10 different times? What if I change the way I want to do it? Then I got to go change every single one of them, perhaps. So what we do instead, when we realize we're repeating something, we make a procedure. So that's what this is over here. So I'm going to pull that off. So I'm making a procedure called dance, and dance has a number of steps, it has an effect change, and it has a number of repeats. So otherwise, I just took the block of code out, copied it from the other script, And then I need to repeat number of times. I need to move steps times, and I need to change the fisheye effect by whatever I give it for effect. Okay. So when you write a procedure like this right here, and I just want to add a comment here. Those oval shapes are called parameters. Procedure. Okay. So sometimes your procedures need to know how much of this, how much of that to use. Now, in order to use that, I then have to, somewhere else in my script, I have to say, okay, now let's use this definition of what it means to dance. And I just say dance, -1 steps, -1 effect change, 20 repeats. Okay, so I'll show you how to build that in just a second. So every time I want to use it, I just put it in there. So then if I decide, oh, let's have him move a slightly different number of steps with a different effect, I can easily add that in by going to my blocks, grabbing another copy of the dance procedure here, and then telling it, okay, so this time we want to have a 2. And as far as the effect, let's go with a -5, but we're only going to do that. Let's see, 1 times 20 is 20. 2 times 10 would be 20. I'm only going to repeat it 10 times. So he covers the same distance, but just faster, right? And I can add as many of those as I want. And if I decide I want it to change, like I want all of them, instead of using the fisheye effect, I want it to pixelate maybe. In this other version over here, every time I have one of those repeat blocks, I have to go change fisheye to pixelate, change fixeye to pixelate, change fixeye to pixelate. It's a pain in the ass. In the procedure, I just change it once, and it's changed every time I use it. Okay, so procedures are ways to make your code more reusable, more efficient, and easier to read. Okay, so instead of seeing, this chunk of code 6, 7, 10 times, we just call this little block there, however much we need. So consider, for example, you have these predefined motion blocks that you can work with. You can use procedure to make a new kind of motion, like run in a circle or spin around, things like that. And you just call that, and it just does what you want. So you can build things like this to your own specifications with the idea of a procedure. Okay, so we enhance the kinds of things we can do with the software. All right. So let's make one. So you all did dance the other day. Let's revise your dance programs to do what I've got here. So what I'm going to do in mine right here is I'm just going to get my old version of dance. So if you could play along with me, I'd appreciate it. So I'm going to go, mine was called Dan Dances on Stage. So what I want you to do is add a procedure to your dancing script. And I just want to walk through how to do it. So you got to get inside your script. And I'll go through some of the mistakes people often make when they're trying to set up a procedure and help you not to make that mistake in the future. So go find your dancing script. Should look something like this. If you didn't get to this yet for some reason, there should be a version of this in the chapter scripts. Was this chapter 2 or 3? I forgot now. Chapter 2. I think it's, which one was about? Oh, chapter 3, because it was about effects. Yeah, chapter 3, that looks. Yeah, so this was in, so again, if you didn't do yours, then go into chapter scripts, chapter 3, and grab the dancing script. So what I want to do is see this bottom repeat 20. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to duplicate it and pull it out here. And I want to turn that into the procedure. Okay. So that's the idea. I want to make more easily repeatable. So to do that, I then go to my blocks, bottom left. And if I go too fast on something, say, hey, can you back up and do blah, blah, blah again? And your my block should be empty. So in my blocks, you're going to make a new block. And when we make a block, we have 4 things to choose from here. We can add an input place to get a number or text for the block to use. We can add what's called a Boolean. Boolean is true or false, used in like an if-then statement we'll get to later. We're not going to use that. And then you're going to add a label to make your procedure more readable to other people. Okay, so here's the most basic way to do it. Give your block a name. We're going to call it dance. Once I give it a name, I can just start using it unless I need to feed it some information. Some blocks don't need any information. They just do their thing. This block needs information. What does it need? Well, if you click on add input, you get an input and it'll say number or text. We need to know how many times to repeat. We need to know how many steps. We need to know what the effect is going to be. I'm going to do steps first. So I'm just going to call this steps. And then I need to also know what the effect number should be. So effect, maybe I'll be a little more specific. I'm going to call it effect value. I'm going to use camel case to type that, effect, and then capital V for value. And then I need to know how many times to repeat. So I'm going to add another input for repeat. Maybe I'll call it repeats. Now, when I look at that, I get what it's going to do because I've got this firmly in my head. So just insert it for now. We'll talk about the run without refresh later. Just put it in there. And so then I'm just going to take that. I'm going to stick it on top here. And when I look at that, it makes sense to me that dance steps, okay, where should steps go in my script below? Where am I setting the steps? Yeah, move. Here I have a move -1, but I want that to be whatever steps is. Steps could be a 1, a -1, a 2, a 5, could be anything. Getting all excited, sorry. Okay. Effect value, where should that go?
Change fish effect by.
Yeah, effect by. So instead of -1, we want whatever effect value it is. It could be -1 or 1 or 5, right? And then where does the number of repeats go? It goes in place of the 20 right there. Okay. So that makes pretty good sense, I think, looking at it, how it's going to work, right? Okay. So then I have to use it. Okay. So how am I going to use it? Well, I'm going to copy this whole chunk here. I'm going to duplicate that, put it right next to it. And then I'm going to pull out everything inside the forever and trash it. Because I don't need all that stuff anymore. Because now I can just grab the dance block and stick it in however many times I need it. How many times do I need it? Well, I had 2 repeat 20s, so I need 2 dance blocks there. Okay, I have a problem now. If this wasn't visible, let's stick it down lower. Okay, when I pull in the dance, this smaller version of the dance, which means actually use that procedure, what if I forget what goes in which one? Oh shit, I forgot. Is this one the steps or the repeat? It should be the repeat, right? No, it should be the steps. Okay. So although in the procedure, it makes sense because I can see the variable names and I made good choices about variable names. When I use the block, I then have to go look for the procedure to remember what thing goes where. Okay, so this is mistake number 1 people name when they're using procedures. They don't label the procedures properly. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I'd go about labeling this procedure. And it turns out you can right-click on the definition for the procedure that you made and go back in and edit it, but you can't go and drop in a label in between these things after. Okay, so what that means is I kind of got to start over sort of by deleting some stuff. So I'm going to delete down to steps there and we'll rebuild it. The other thing about these blocks is you have to have either an input block for text or number or Boolean right after the name of it. You can't throw a label right after the name of it because the name is a label and it won't let you put two labels next to each other. Okay, so it's always name it. If you need a parameter, which is like a variable in math, put it in. If you don't need one, forget about it. The name of it can be as long as you want. Make Dan dance left, changes fisheye, and you could write a sentence for the name of it. Usually we try to keep them short. Okay, so to make this more readable when I use it, I have to add a text label next, and my text label is going to be steps again. And you'll see why in just a second. I'm doing it this way. And then I'm ready to put my other variable. What's my other variable for? It's for the fisheye effect. So I need to do, I'm going to call it effect value again. Effect value. And then I'm going to add a label after that. And the label after that is going to be effect change. And then I'm going to add another variable for the repeats. Repeats. Let's see what I call it. Repeats before. And then I'm going to add next to that parameter, which I'll call it a variable sometimes. Parameter and variable are almost the same thing. I need to add a label. So maybe I'll type something like repeat times. All right, so I have dance, and then I have a number input for steps, and then I have a label called steps. Then I have a number input for effect value, and then I have a label called effect change. And then I have a number input for repeats, and then I have a label that says repeat times. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. All right, now because I use the same variable names, it still says repeats like before, it still says steps like before, and it still says effect value. If you changed any of the names, then those will disappear and you have to redrop them in there. Okay. Now, here's the cool thing about using it. Now, when I scroll up to use it, it's going to be more readable when I need to plug in the numbers. So now it says dance blank steps, blank effect change, blank repeat times, and now I have a better idea of what number goes where. Okay. So it's a good idea when you write procedures, if you have parameter inputs, that you add a label before or after designating what goes there. Okay. You can sneak the label in before, you would just add it to the name of the procedure, but that often looks weird, and I don't usually do that. So now here I can say, okay, we want to, my first time through, I want to dance one step with a 1 value for effect change and 20 repeats. And the next time I call this procedure, I want a -1 dance step, and I want a -1 effect, and I want 20 repeats. And so I've made the code shorter, a little bit more readable, and it's going to work the same way. And if I need to throw in some other dance moves that involve steps, a fisheye change, and a change costume that repeats a certain amount of times, then I can throw in as many as I want very easily with one line. Okay. Now, if any of that wasn't clear, or you want to make sure your code looks like mine and you're having a hard time when I move around the screen, keep in mind that I made an announcement, and my announcement has my dancing procedure script, which has the pre-done version of this that you can go look at later if you want to. And if you're watching this video in the future, I'll put links to those in the description of the video. All right. So questions about, oops, which one am I on? This one? This one here. So again, the way a procedure is made useful is you have a block of code that you want to give a special name, maybe, or you have a block of code that needs to repeat often throughout your script. So then you take that block of code and you stick it in a procedure by defining a name for it. You don't always have variable inputs like we see here. We'll see that in some examples in the book. And then once you define it, you can then use it wherever you want. Okay. And again, procedures are helpful to make code easier to edit in the future and more readable when you're using the code or reviewing the code later. Questions? Okay, so this is what we're working on all week, getting used to using broadcast messages and getting used to using procedures. So let's take a look at the assignment for the reading today. Try to chop up this recording.